Our first guest with us today on the show is the Deputy Director for Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities, Jim Bruckbauer. But Jim, I'm so excited because the thought you really are the person behind trying to push for us to get a railway system from Ann Arbor up to Traverse City and the cities along the way. This has been in the making for years, though. What is the possibility of this actually taking shape?
Well, the possibility is quite high. We are, working to advance this project and bring it forward to its next steps. It's a big idea, that's for sure. And yeah, it has been talked about for years. Several years ago, the state was creating a plan for both freight and passenger rail. And one of the things that the Michigan Department of Transportation did was when it was creating a state rail plan, they had worked with groups around the state to hold forums and get feedback from places all over the state, and people in those forums and in those surveys said, hey, if we're going to invest in rail, we want a train connection to Traverse City. And so it came up as one of the top priorities in this public input session all around the state. And so it's a lot of people are interested in it. It's a unique opportunity too, because the state still owns a majority of the right of way and the tracks that are still in place right now that do connect the Ann Arbor area to Traverse City. And they're also in good shape still. So we see this as an opportunity that we want to continue to explore. Right now, they're being used for freight traffic. So goods are being shipped from northern Michigan to places all over the country, and we just want to see a little bit more passenger service along the same tracks.
So when you hear about this, when you're just a regular person such as myself, I will say I have, as a former news reporter, I have covered so many of these press conferences where they would bring out like the shiny boards with the plan and this, that, and the other. But from the press conference to actually seeing reality, I have yet to see any of these projects come to fruition. So with that, what will it take to actually make this happen?
Yeah, so it is, big transportation projects like this do take some time, and we are an advocacy organization, so we certainly relate to getting impatient with the pace of change. But a big idea like this does take time. Like I said, this is a unique opportunity because the state owns the majority of the right of way. And so when you're talking about big infrastructure and transportation projects like this, that part of the process is already taken care of. A lot of places around the country, the railroad tracks are privately owned or have even been taken out. And this is the unique opportunity with this particular idea, because the state still owns the right of way for the most part, and the infrastructure is still there. So we're just looking at what improvements need to be made in order to start putting passengers on trains on a regular basis. Right now, there are excursion trains that are operating along the corridor. There's a group in Owasso called the Steam Railroading Institute, and over the past decades, they've put together these fall color tour trains up in the northern Michigan area, and also downstate in the Owasso area, but then also traveling between Mount Pleasant and Cadillac. They've put together summer trains. So there are some kind of tourist type trains, but what we're interested in is looking at the regular passenger service. And we do want to start small and build the service incrementally. And one of the first steps that happened over the past couple of years is we were able to put together an initial study on what it would take to get trains going certain speeds and how many people might ride it. what had happened after that is that the state is continuing to invest in the tracks for both the freight and the passenger side. So in particular, in the Traverse City area, repairs were made to the tracks that would allow passengers to travel directly into Traverse City, and repairs are going to continue to be made over the next year. So we're getting some of that analysis done, and we are seeing the state invest in the tracks again for both the freight and the passenger side. So we are hitting some key milestones, and we're just excited to launch this project into its next phases.
I'm looking at this and there are so many benefits and even economic benefits as well. But before we get into that conversation, we're also in the middle of a pandemic, and the focus right now is definitely not on rail transportation from Ann Arbor to the northern part of the state. How has that impacted the work that you and your team are doing?
Sure. Well, the pandemic has certainly slowed down our ability to put together potential train rides, even with just getting like a small group of people on it, just to look at the tracks and see what's needed next. But overall, the project is still moving ahead. We are looking at when we can start to put train rides together, and a lot of it is going to depend on the pandemic and some of the safety standards that we want to put in place. So it has slowed our ability to actually put people on trains. However, again, we are still moving ahead with some of those track repairs and also just getting those next steps needed as far as analysis for putting the whole thing together. I mean, we have to figure out, what kind of operating structure a project like this needs. Should it be a nonprofit, a for-profit? So this gives us a little time to put some of those pieces in place. But overall, the project is still moving ahead, that's for sure.
So as you mentioned, you're an advocacy group. So why did you get involved in this?
So we are, again, a nonprofit advocacy organization. We're based right here in Traverse City, and we work primarily in areas of local food, clean energy, and transportation policy. For 20 years, we were known as the Michigan Land Use Institute. So many people still know us by that name and recognize that name. And we advance policies that are regional and statewide that will help people gain access to, again, more locally grown food, cleaner sources of energy. But then in our transportation work, we're trying to help people get around by using lots of different transportation options other than just the car. So, when an opportunity like this comes up, again, a project that the infrastructure is still there, the state still owns most of the corridor. This is a downtown to downtown connection that will connect not only people who are traveling around the state, but college students. We thought, hey, this is an opportunity that we need to at least explore and move forward. And so far, it's been working out well. I mean, it's an idea that has a lot of public support, including from the business community of the people who are trying to attract talent to Michigan, because this project, not only is about just like the freight and passenger mobility connections throughout Michigan, but it's about connecting students, universities, and people who, workers who just want to get around the state without jumping in a car every time they want to get around. So, it's a big idea, and it's something that, these are just opportunities that our organization continues to explore. Not only are we trying to get the policies in place, but we're trying to put together on the ground projects.
Yeah, I could imagine, especially if I'm a parent, so many kids that go to Central or some of those other universities, they, students can't have a car typically their first year or two. So parents are making that trip up and back. So if I could put them on the train, and even if it's not coming to my doorstep, I only have to go to Ann Arbor. That's an easier trip to pick them up than going all the way up to Mount Pleasant. But with that too, do you feel like this could help and trying to attract people to move to the state of Michigan, because one thing that you do know and you see when you go to other cities such as Chicago, you don't need a car to get around. There are a lot of people that, live in various cities across the country, and you can live without a car. But here in the Metro Detroit and within the state of Michigan, because we are the auto capital of the world, it's nearly impossible.
That's correct. I mean, a lot of people talk about this stretch. It's about a 240-mile stretch. It's a distance that's almost too far to drive, but too close to fly. So it's actually that sweet spot, the transit people call it, for a rail line like this. And yeah, I mean, the idea just crosses many generations. I mean, think of the baby boomers who, are getting into decades where they're not just so eager to jump in a car to travel from, downstate to the northern Michigan area and between. And, think about just the families and again, the students. There are many different universities along this line because it connects up again from Ann Arbor up to Mount Pleasant and then over to Cadillac and then up to Traverse City. So it's definitely a university connector. And then, yeah, that next generation worker who wants to be in Michigan and not necessarily have a car to always get around the state. When we visited some of the tech businesses down in Ann Arbor, and when we talked to them about this idea, we were at one company and one of the employees came up to us and said, "Hey, I love this idea. I just moved here from Michigan from Boulder, Colorado to work here at this company. And I didn't have a driver's license because I didn't need one where I lived before. And then when I moved here, I needed to get a driver's license. And, he thought it was so annoying. And so he said, yeah, I just want the ability to get around the state and not have to always jump in a car." So.
Right. And on top of that, for, some of the younger people too, the car is such an added expense as well. So I would imagine if I'm, looking at jobs across the country and, that could factor into which job I decide to go with.
That's correct. And again, Michigan is in what I would consider a mobility revolution with all the efforts of the Michigan Economic Development Corp and the state's just mobility priorities. This is just an addition to a lot of these mobility connections that we're already making within cities. I mean, you're seeing advancements in autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, and just a whole, plethora of ways that people will be able to start getting around within cities. And this is that kind of downtown to downtown, city to city connector.
Have you talked to some of the like mayors and elected leaders in some of these smaller towns? Because if you can get a train that stops directly downtown and a tiny little town, it has to be the possibility of an economic boom for their community.
That's correct. I mean, we see the interest from all these towns that this train line would potentially run through. Like I said, it is a downtown to downtown connector. So the people in these communities are seeing this as a way to be able to connect to Southeast Michigan, where they might be going for traveling for a number of different reasons. But, not only is it this Ann Arbor to Traverse City thing, but it is for these towns, these mid-Michigan downtowns that I think are some of the best downtowns in the entire country because of their buildings and the rivers that go through them. These are some historic downtowns that I think are some of the envy of the rest of the country. And this would allow families in these communities to be able to jump on a train and have access to major metro areas and just be able to get around the whole state.
Jim Bruckbauer with us here on the Oakland County MegaCast. He's the Deputy Director for Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities. And we are talking about the plan to build the Ann Arbor to Traverse City train. And so what's next for this project, Jim?
So we are excited to launch this into its next phases. we, number one, need to complete the next formal studies that need to be completed in order for there to be fast moving regular service along this line. So there are environmental and engineering studies that need to take place. Again, we need to explore the operating structure for how passenger trains could run along this line. So we need to know, should this be a nonprofit or a for-profit? We are in the process of exploring those different operating structures. And then again, hopefully we'll begin running tests along the train line itself. We do want to get people in a train and be able to look at, okay, how long is it going to take to travel in between these towns, and what are we looking at? What type of investment do we need to get this into its next phases? And then over time, start to put together more train rides and kind of build the service incrementally. We want to start with potentially seasonal type trains and then just build more regular service as we go along.
At the end of the day, this is about money. Where is the money coming from, and how much money do you anticipate this project needing to get it completed?
Sure, and that's a great question. Our organization is privately funded, so we're a private nonprofit, and we get almost 100% of our funding through private foundation grants and individual donors. And so the funding that's gone into this work so far has been from our organization, privately funded, and we are looking at, what type of structure is needed for both the investment in the infrastructure, but also into the capital and the operations. And that's why I say we're looking into just different nonprofit structures or for-profit structures, because you're seeing a lot of for-profit investment in rail around the country more recently, in Florida and Texas and the Las Vegas, Los Angeles area. So there is a lot of private investment right now that is going into passenger rail service. And so we are just looking at all the different opportunities that are out there. We don't see this as a publicly funded project. We are looking at certainly the private sector sources that can go into a project like this.
So if COVID has taught us anything, it's about being creative, and we are seeing more collaboration between a public-private possibility of coming together to make something like this happen. Could that be something to be explored?
That is absolutely being explored, and that's why the potential for a nonprofit structure could make sense for something like this, where there may be some public investment, again, in the state's own infrastructure that they are maintaining, and then there could be private investment that goes into the actual capital and operations for running a train. And then those are some of the things that we are exploring. We're looking at some of the costs and looking at all the different funding sources. But again, we do need to get creative. We don't see this as a major, publicly funded infrastructure project. This is something where there are models out there where there's private investment that goes into a project like this.
I love the idea of this. I think it would definitely be utilized on so many different avenues. Jim Bruckbauer with us here. Just another minute or two, we're talking about the Ann Arbor to Traverse City train and the possibility of that actually becoming a reality one day. And with that, Jim, if people are interested in trying to find out a little bit more about what your organization is about, but also about this project, where can they get that information?
So you can find our website at groundworkcenter.org, and that's for the Groundwork Center, which is the nonprofit that's really moving this project along. You can just Google Groundwork Center as well, and it should pop up. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, which is just incredible. So you can find more about our organization through that site. You can find out more about the train project through a2tc.org, or I'm sure many of your listeners will probably Google Ann Arbor to Traverse City train. Yeah, that's a simple way to find it as well. So we try to update people as much as possible. We're trying to get into the communities and making sure people are up to date and have opportunities for providing input into this project as well. That's one of our goals, just to make sure, it's not just us just moving this thing along. We want to make sure that we're hearing from people in all these communities so they can help shape this idea.
Well, I'm down for this. I will tell you that. But with that, you have a big job ahead of you because in the middle of this, again, we're in a pandemic. So trying to talk about this, it has to be a little bit difficult during this time. But it is an important project that can definitely reshape our economy in some of these towns as well. So I love it, and I hope that we see it come to a reality one day. Jim, thank you again for taking time out of your day to be with us.
And thank you very much for having me.